What's up, guys? I'm Drip Thulu, and back when I was in first grade, I was the biggest accidental pervert known to mankind. I may have only been 6, but I was an absolute menace to society, and especially to my teacher at the time. Since the last Drippy Diaries seemed to do well and you guys liked it, I decided to do another one, and totally not because I couldn't come up with a decent video idea for this week. Definitely not that. Before we get into the story, I just want to say, what the fuck? BTS is in the fucking White House. I'm not gonna make a video on that whole thing. I just wanted to mention it, and well, I thought he would be perfect. Seriously, guys, what the fuck? They are a goddamn boy K-pop group and they're meeting the president. Dude, I really hope Army doesn't make some weird ass smut fanfic called like BTS X Biden. Anyway, let's get right into the story now. So this was over a decade ago and I was a little relatively pure shitlet. Me with my hyper Asian features, and if I do say so myself, I was a cute ass child. You know, my typical Asian bangs, oversized clothes because my parents said I'd grow into it. You know the deal. At the time, like every other Asian child, the only things I knew were math, education, video games on the weekend, martial arts. Oh, and did I mention math? And you know, while other kids had their dope ass Lego sets and monster trucks, I had an abacus and a 5th grade leapfrog. If you don't get it by now, I was raised very traditionally. However, just because my parents were strict on me growing up didn't mean that I wasn't still a child. You know how kids can be accidentally ruthless and roast the ever-living shit out of someone? Like without even intending to do that? As you might also know, kids will do shit that, if they weren't kids, would get them charged with sexual harassment. Obviously they mean no harm, which is why they get away with it. This is very important for later. Back then, I went to a private school that was unironically right across from my house. No, it was not Cranbrook, but my parents did have a real good marriage. I remember when I entered the first grade, I was all happy and excited like every other kid. I was waiting in the school playground with my fairly oversized shoes, shirt, and pants, and with me were some of my classmates that I hadn't seen since June and some new faces. And I don't know what I did. I mean, I was a kid for fuck's sake. But what I do remember is seeing the woman who would be my teacher. She stood at the front of all the kiddies with a sign that said her name along with a grade number that she was teaching. We'll call her Miss Laura. She was a young and relatively attractive white lady with medium-length brunette hair and a very typical elementary school teacher getup. After some time and giving the kids plenty of time to arrive, we were eventually walked in by grade order and led to our classrooms. From here, the day goes by normal, Miss Laura introduces herself, and we all kinda get to know each other, you know, the whole shebang. However, in the middle of the classroom, there was a fairly large black carpet. During the first day, Miss Laura explained to us that during, part of the normal school day, she would read all of us a book, and when it was time to do so, we would all gather and sit along the perimeter of the carpet. She had us all try it out, but she didn't read a book because, it was the first day. She just wanted to make sure that we all knew what was gonna happen. The rest of the day went without a hitch, and eventually school was let out. And then another day of school goes by, and nothing of note happens. And just like that, it's the weekend, and well, we can pass that too because nothing important happened there either. Now it's Monday and it's school time. It's still relatively early in the day, maybe about a period or two before lunchtime, and Miss Laura decides that this would be the time to read to all of us. So all of us good little kiddies gather around in a circle. I sit next to my best friend at the time, and we, like all good children, listen very closely and carefully to the story. I don't remember what it was about and what really happened after that, but that just means that the rest of the day was uneventful. Up till now, everything I said probably sounds like an unimportant backstory, but trust me, everything I said is necessary information because now is the part that we all came here for. Sometime during the first grade, for whatever fuck shit reason, I decided to sit next to my teacher during the reading time. It was honestly probably just because I was a big old teacher's pet growing up. And this continued for some time until one fateful day. All of us young grade schoolers were gathered around listening intently to the story being told to us because God knows why I yawned, and I stretched my tiny arms out and leaned back. And what greeted me was a sight that I will never forget, mainly because of how often I saw it. Looking behind Miss Laura's back, there was a fascinating tattoo running along the bottom of her lower back towards her ass. A thing to note, she always wore like mid-rise jeans, and you know when you wear those, if you sit down crisscross applesauce, the back kind of flaps open? Yeah, that's my view along with her shirt riding up slightly. I can remember it like it was yesterday. Through the flap created between her jeans and her waist, I could see the bottom of what looked like a stylized cross along her spine, leading into black panties and, let me not continue that because it sounds like I'm describing a porno. Nonetheless, though, I was enthralled by the view of it. However, I mean, I did understand I just kind of felt it that I wasn't supposed to be caught doing this. So after the extended yawn, I moved back into place. Now, if you think that's the end of the viewing experience for the day, you are dead fucking wrong. I remember vividly that I would take any opportunity to lean back and stare right the fuck at that tattoo and ass crack. Picking my nose and over-exaggeratedly twisting my body to get a glimpse of the sight was all par for the course. Yawning about 7 times in 5 minutes? Perfectly normal. Eventually, reading time was over, and sadly, the wondrous view of Miss Laura was no more. You might think that's the end of the story, that I only had one spectacular memory, but you are forgetting something very important. I had Miss Laura for the rest of the school year. So if you think that I didn't sit next to her every single reading session, you are out of your goddamn mind. That's right. For the rest of that school year, every day without fail, I would use the precious minutes allotted to me by the book of the day and use whatever somewhat natural excuse to lean my little child body back and stare at that tattoo. The funny thing about all of this is that I literally only stared at the tattoo. I didn't care for her ass crack or the fact that I could see her panties and the outline of her ass. None of that. I only cared for the interesting tat that seemed to go down into her asshole. Because the story wasn't nearly as long as I expected it to be, I'll add in one more, extra story of my youthful perverseness. Except unlike this sphincter viewing party I had with Miss Laura, which was entirely unintentional, this one was completely intentional and for all the expectedly wrong reasons. So around the same time, during my tender youthful years, I shared an Xbox 360 with my brother, and we used to play the shit out of whatever games we had. So COD, of course, we had Alien Hominid, Castle Crashers, and just like games like that. Around this time, Soul Calibur 4 came out, and my brother and I ended up getting it. This game, I would say, was instrumental to my growth, mainly because it was the first thing to teach me, even as a kid, I was a horny, perverted little shit. The only things I remember about the game, besides the fact that Algol and Nightmare were my favorite characters, was how fucking hot Ivy was, and how much I enjoyed beating the ever-living shit out of the female characters in the game. With the first thing I mentioned, I mean, look at her. Look at that specimen of pure, unadulterated, unfiltered, voluptuous sex appeal. Huge-ass tatas, milky, creamy thighs, long, luscious legs. The absolute bomber that is her hairstyle and face. Hoo-wee mama! Of course, it's not like she was the only dick-stimulating character. There were turbo hotties like Taki, Cassandra, Hildegard, Setsuka, but I'm getting off track. So, of course, while I never played Ivy because her kit was way too complex for my kid mind to wrap around, that didn't stop me from using her. Sorta. In the game, there was a character customizer, and you were able to take the given characters in the game and change their gear and shit. Well, when no one was home, I would hide under a blanket and underneath the living room sofa, boot the game up, go into character customization, and well, I would undress her as much as I could and absorb those enticing, pillowy polygons that made up her luscious curves. I remember my heart would race and my full attention would be captured by her bust bosom. I was essentially an 80-year-old public park pervert trapped in an elementary school boy's body. However, this is not the limit of my absolute degeneracy. Far from it. Earlier I mentioned that the only other thing that I remember doing was beating the brakes off of the female characters in the game. You may be thinking that I was possibly an insane sexist growing up that despised women, or a future domestic abuser, but that couldn't be further from the case. Here's the thing. In Soul Calibur, you can do armor breaks, and while it does do shit like increase damage to that area of the character, that was not at all the reason why I did them. When you do an armor break, like the name suggests, the armor in that given area of the character breaks. For female characters in the game, if you break all their armor, they will practically just be in their bra and panties. So with this in mind, I used to specifically always fight the female characters, not with the goal of beating them, rather with the goal of breaking their armor. As you might expect, like the internal horny geezer I was on the inside, I would just stare and fill my sight of their mostly bare skin. Of course, as you might also predict, the character most often on the receiving end of my sensual beatings was Ivy. And although I will say Sophidia and Setsuka also got a good amount of poundings from me as well. You might be dumb and thinking, Thulu, did you beat your dick too while you were at it? And that gets a resounding fuck no. I was too young to even understand why the view of bare female skin had me feel that way. You know how in hentai, the Shota character is like, IDK what this feeling in my balls is, which then the thirsty Onee-chan struts up to him and proceeds to fuck his brains out? Well, at the time, that was the exact feeling I had. Not the coming buckets part, but the I feel strange in my chest part. I didn't understand it or know how to describe it. Another thing I enjoyed doing was playing female characters, getting my ass beat by the CPU, and then after having all my armor broken, I would then proceed to win the game. The only reason is because at the end of the match, there's a little end fight cutscene where the character that won would have a little monologue and pose. During this part, whatever armor the character lost during the fight, it would not be recovered for the cutscene. Yeah, you can guess where I'm going with this. Anyway, that was a fun and quite fucking weird story back from my childhood. I'll stop there for today because, I don't want to make myself look even worse, even though it's pretty funny. Honestly, guys, I have no idea what I'm gonna make my next video about, so if you have anything that you'd like to see in the coming weeks, please leave a comment because I'm seriously fucking dry on material. It's been fun. See you all later. Have a decent day. Ja.